Sophia was a 21-year-old woman with sorrowful eyes and a kind heart. She resided in a spacious house in Lagos with her father, Richard, her stepmother, Linda, and her younger sister, Emma. Sophia's mother had passed away when Sophia was born, leaving her to grow up without a mother's love. Her father, Richard, never showed her any affection. It was as if Sophia was invisible to him. Richard had never loved Sophia's mother. Their marriage had been arranged by his own father, forcing him into a union he never desired. When Sophia's mother died, Richard felt nothing but indifference. To him, Sophia was a constant reminder of a marriage he was compelled into, a life he never chose. His heart was cold towards his eldest daughter, and his eyes only sparkled when he looked at Emma, his cherished daughter with Linda, his childhood sweetheart. Emma was only 2 years younger than Sophia, but Richard treated her like a princess. He gave her everything she wanted. "Daddy, can I have the new dress from the mall?" Emma would ask, her voice sweet as honey. "Of course, my darling," Richard would reply, smiling. "Anything for my princess." Whenever Emma asked for something, Richard would rush to fulfill her wishes: new dresses, fancy shoes, or a day out with her friends. Emma always got what she wanted, but when Sophia asked for anything, even just a kind word, Richard acted like he didn't hear her. He never looked at Sophia or called her his princess. Linda, Sophia's stepmother, was even crueler. She hated Sophia because she blamed Sophia's mother for taking away the man she loved. In her eyes, Sophia was just a living reminder of the woman who had once stood in her way. "You're just like your mother," Linda would hiss at Sophia. "Lazy and good for nothing." She made Sophia do all the house chores, even though they had plenty of servants. Sophia would scrub the floors until her hands were sore, wash the dishes until her back ached, and sweep the yard under the hot sun. But Linda wasn't done with her cruelty. She would forbid the servants from giving Sophia any food she could eat after her work was done. "If there's anything left," Linda would say with a cold smile. Sometimes Sophia went days without food, her stomach growling with hunger. She would quietly drink water, hoping it would stop the pain and continue with her chores. One day, Sophia saw Emma leaving for another outing with her friends. Emma wore a bright pink dress, her hair done beautifully and neatly. She laughed and chattered as she got into the car, waving at Richard. He waved back, a proud smile on his face. Sophia watched them from the window, feeling a heavy weight in her chest. "Why do they hate me?" Sophia whispered to herself. She wished for a hug from her father, a kind word from Linda, or even a friendly smile from Emma. But every time Sophia tried to speak to them, they turned their backs on her. It was as if she was a shadow in the house, unnoticed and unloved. When Emma returned from her outings, she would often bring back bags full of new clothes and shoes. She would show them off, twirling in her new dresses and laughing. "Look at my new shoes, Daddy," Emma would say, her voice mocking. "Richard says they are the best in the city. You could never have shoes like these." Sophia would smile weakly and go back to her chores, her heart aching. Emma loved to make trouble for Sophia. If something went missing or broke, Emma would point at Sophia. "It was her, Sophia. She did it," she would shout, her eyes glinting with mischief. Linda would turn to Sophia with anger. "You ungrateful girl," she would scream. "After all we do for you, this is how you repay us." Richard would say nothing, his face stony as Linda yelled at Sophia. Even if Sophia tried to explain, nobody listened. She learned to keep quiet and take the blame. It was easier that way. Each day was the same for Sophia, filled with endless chores and harsh words. She longed for a different life, one where she was loved and cared for, but that life seemed like a faraway dream, something she could never reach. The only thing Sophia had was hope, a small light inside her heart that refused to go out. She hoped that one day someone would see her truly, see her and love her for who she was. As the days went by, Sophia's heart grew heavier, weighed down by loneliness, but she didn't let her tears fall. She kept them locked away deep inside as she swept the floors and scrubbed the dishes, wishing for a love that seemed so far away. One sunny afternoon, Richard sat in the office looking worried. His business was in big trouble, the company was losing money fast, and he didn't know how to save it. Desperate for help, Richard went to see Mr. Brown, the richest man in town. Mr. Brown listened to Richard's worries with a thoughtful look on his face. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I can help you, Richard," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "But there is one condition." Richard's heart raced with hope. "What is it, Mr. Brown?" "I'll do anything," he promised eagerly. Mr. Brown leaned forward. "I want one of your daughters to marry my son, Liam." Richard was taken aback. He knew about Liam. Rumor has it that he was involved in an accident, leaving him disabled. The proposal surprised him, but the promise of saving his business overshadowed any concerns. "I agree," Richard said quickly, not even bothering to ask for his daughter's opinion. He assumed it didn't matter as long as the deal was sealed. Back home, Richard decided it would be Sophia who would marry Liam. She was the less favored daughter, and he didn't mind if she was unhappy. All he cared about was saving his business. Richard called Sophia into his study. She entered, her eyes filled with fear because she could sense something bad was about to happen. Richard looked at her with a hard expression. "You will marry Liam," he announced firmly. "Mr. Brown will save our business, but only if you marry his son." Sophia's eyes widened in shock. "Father, please, I don't know Liam. How can I marry someone I've never even met?" she pleaded, her voice trembling. Richard's face grew stern. "You don't have a choice," he snapped. "If you refuse, you will be thrown out of this house. You will have no one to care for you." Sophia felt like the ground was falling away beneath her. Linda and Emma, who had been eavesdropping, stepped into the room with smirks on their faces. "Listen to your father," Linda said with a wicked smile. "You should be grateful he's even giving you a chance to help the family. You've been nothing but a burden." Emma giggled, enjoying Sophia's distress. "Yeah, you should feel lucky that anyone wants to marry you. You don't deserve anything better," she taunted. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I can't do it," she whispered. "I can't marry someone just to save your business. I want to marry for love." Richard's face turned dark with anger. "Enough," he roared. "You will marry Liam, or you will leave this family and never come back. I will not have an ungrateful daughter ruin everything." Sophia cried out in despair, but her cries were ignored. Richard turned to the servants and barked, "Take her to her room. Lock her in. She won't leave until the wedding day." Two servants grabbed Sophia by the arms and dragged her upstairs. They shoved her into her room and locked the door behind her. Sophia pounded on the door, screaming for someone to help her, but no one came. She sank to the floor, sobbing inside her room. Sophia felt like a prisoner. She had no way to escape and no one to help her. She looked out the window, wishing she could fly away far from the cruelty of her family, but there was no escape. The walls of her room felt like they were closing in, trapping her in a life she didn't want. Meanwhile, Linda was dancing in the shadows of the hallway, a smile on her face. "Finally, I'll be rid of Sophia," she whispered to herself. "I've been waiting for this moment for so long. Soon she will be gone, and I won't have to see her sad face anymore. My Emma will have everything, just like she deserves." Sophia cried herself to sleep that night, knowing that her fate was sealed. She had no choice but to marry Liam or face a life on the streets. Her father's words echoed in her mind, filling her heart with fear and sadness. She knew that whatever happened next, her life would never be the same again. The day of the wedding came quickly, and Sophia felt like she was stuck in a bad dream. She wore a beautiful white gown, but there was no smile on her face. Her heart was heavy with sadness and fear as she walked down the aisle. She finally saw Liam. He was a handsome man with deep, serious eyes, but he sat in a wheelchair. His face looked distant and sad, and Sophia could feel the coldness between them even before they exchanged vows. After the ceremony, Sophia moved into Liam's house. It was big and beautiful, but it felt cold and empty. Liam's room was on the ground floor, filled with books and a piano he never played anymore. Liam used to be full of life and joy. He was smart and had studied in the best schools abroad. He had big dreams, and everyone admired him, but everything changed when the accident happened. A careless driver had hit Liam one day on his way home, leaving him unable to walk. The accident not only shattered his body but also his spirit. Liam's fiancée, who had stood by his side for many years, left him soon after the accident. She couldn't bear the thought of a future filled with doctor visits and uncertainty. Her departure broke Liam's heart. From that moment, he became cold and temperamental, shutting out the world and isolating himself from everyone, even his own father. The love that once filled Liam's heart turned into bitterness and distrust. Mr. Brown had tried everything to help his son. He consulted many doctors, some from the best hospitals in the world, but none of the doctors could promise that Liam would walk again. Each time, the news was the same: there was no hope. Slowly, Liam began to lose all hope too. He stopped going for treatments, saying they were a waste of time. Seeing his once lively son now isolated and miserable pained Mr. Brown deeply. He feared that Liam would end up completely alone, and he couldn't bear the thought. Mr. Brown wanted to find a partner for Liam, someone who could bring light back into his life, but no one from their social status was willing to marry their daughter to a man who would spend his life in a wheelchair. Desperate, Mr. Brown began to lose hope of ever finding someone who could help his son. That was when Richard came to Mr. Brown with a business proposal. Seeing an opportunity, Mr. Brown set a condition for the deal: Richard had to agree for his daughter to marry Liam. Mr. Brown believed that Sophia, being young and kind, could bring comfort and company to his son. He hoped this arrangement would help Liam find some happiness again, even if it was just a little. Mr. Brown told Liam, "Your mother wouldn't want to see you so sad and alone. She would want you to be happy, even if it's with a stranger." Liam missed his mother dearly, and so he agreed to the marriage, but only to ease his father's worries. After moving in, Sophia tried to be kind to Liam. She brought him his meals and helped him with his medicine, but Liam didn't care. He believed that Sophia was only there for his father's money. "You don't need to pretend that you care about me," Liam said one day, his voice cold. "You just want the riches my father can give you." Sophia was hurt by his words. "That's not true, Liam," she said softly. "I don't care about money. I want us to try and be friends." But Liam just turned his head away, refusing to listen. Life in Liam's house was hard for Sophia. The servants followed Liam's lead. They treated Sophia with little respect, whispering behind her back and calling her names. "She's only here for the money," they would say, laughing. "Just look at her pretending to care." Sophia heard these things, and it made her heart ache. She felt lonely and trapped, just like in her father's house. Every day, Sophia would try her best to make Liam smile. She would tell him stories and even cook his favorite meals, but nothing worked. Liam's heart was locked away, and he wouldn't let anyone in. He spent most of his time alone, staring out the window or reading his books. Sophia would sit beside him, hoping he would talk to her, but he stayed silent. One day, as Sophia tried to start a conversation, Liam snapped. "Why are you still here?" he shouted. "Can't you see I don't want you around? I didn't ask for this marriage, and I don't want it. Go back to your room and leave me alone." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She quietly got up and went to her room, feeling more alone than ever. She wished she had a mother and someone she could talk to. Her new home was supposed to be a place of safety, but it felt just like the house she had left. As the days passed, Sophia realized that she couldn't leave. She had nowhere to go. Her father had made it clear she wasn't welcome back. So she stayed, hoping that one day Liam's heart would soften. She wished that one day they could talk and maybe, just maybe, he would see her as more than just a stranger. She held on to this small hope, even as the coldness of their marriage threatened to freeze her heart completely. One evening, as Liam wheeled past Sophia's room, he heard soft sobs. He paused and gently knocked on the door. "Sophia, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Sophia quickly wiped her tears and replied, "It's nothing, Liam. Just thinking." Liam didn't push her for answers, but from that moment, he began to watch her more closely. He noticed how the servants whispered behind her back and ignored her. He saw how hard Sophia tried to bring a smile to his face, even when he ignored her. The next morning, Liam called for all the servants to gather in the living room. His voice was stern as he spoke. "I've noticed how some of you treat Sophia," he said. "She is my wife, and she deserves your respect. Anyone who disrespects her will no longer work here." The room fell silent. The servants exchanged nervous glances. They had never seen Liam so serious. That very day, Liam fired 2 of the worst offenders. The rest of the servants started showing Sophia the respect she deserved. They began calling her Madame Sophia and treated her with kindness. Sophia was surprised by the sudden change. She noticed how the servants now smiled at her and greeted her warmly. She felt a wave of relief and happiness. Later that day, Liam approached Sophia. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've been unfair to you. I see now that you're not here for money. You're a good person." Sophia felt her heart soften. "Thank you, Liam," she replied. "I only wanted us to be friends." Liam nodded. "Maybe we can be more than friends," he said quietly. As days turned into weeks, Liam and Sophia spent more time together. They would sit in the garden, talking about their dreams and fears. Sophia told Liam about her life in her father's house and how she had always felt unwanted. Liam shared stories about his accident, his lost hopes, and his sadness. For the first time in a long while, they both felt understood. They were no longer alone. As they spent more time together, Liam and Sophia grew closer. They fell in love, their hearts healing from the pain of their pasts. Liam's father, Mr. Brown, was happy to see the young couple grow closer with each passing day. One afternoon, Mr. Brown came rushing into the house with a letter in his hand. "Sophia, I have great news," he exclaimed. "I've received a message from a renowned surgeon abroad. He believes he can help you walk again." Liam said, "The surgery has a high success rate." Liam's eyes widened. He had given up hope a long time ago, but now a small flicker of hope began to grow inside him. "Sophia, you should do it," she said softly. "It could change everything." Liam agreed to go through with the surgery. They flew abroad, and the days leading up to the surgery were filled with both hope and fear. On the day of the operation, Sophia held Liam's hand. "Everything will be all right," she whispered. Liam nodded, taking comfort in her words. Hours passed, and finally, the surgeon came out with a smile. "The surgery was successful," he announced. "With time and therapy, Liam will walk again." Mr. Brown hugged his son tightly, tears of joy running down his cheeks. Sophia's heart felt light, and she couldn't stop smiling. She was so happy for Liam. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work. Liam went through therapy every day, and slowly, he began to stand. Then he took his first steps. Sophia was always by his side, encouraging him. As Liam grew stronger, his love for Sophia deepened. He showered her with the care and attention she had never received before. He would bring her flowers, cook her favorite meals, and always listen to her. Sophia felt like she had found the love she had always wished for. Liam decided to take charge of his life again. He told his father he was ready to help with the family business. Mr. Brown was overjoyed and thanked Sophia. "You've brought happiness back into my son's life," he said warmly. Sophia smiled, knowing that she too had found joy. Liam and Sophia stood together, looking at the sunset. They knew that the future held many challenges, but as long as they had each other, they could face anything. Their hearts were filled with hope, and they were ready to start a new chapter in their lives. Meanwhile, back at Richard's house, the family continued life as usual. After solving the company's crisis, Richard continued supporting Emma and Linda's luxurious lifestyle. Life was good, and they were all happy. None of them thought about Sophia. It had been 2 years since she left. They didn't bother to even find out where she was living with her husband. They were too busy living their luxurious lives to wonder if she was okay. Sophia was now married to Liam, the son of the richest man in town. To Richard, Sophia was out of sight and out of mind. He didn't care that she married a total stranger. His business was doing well, and he felt he didn't need her anymore. But one day, things started to change. Richard's business began to fall apart. His company lost a major contract, his business sales were dropping, and customers were complaining. His workers were unhappy, and his money was slowly disappearing. Richard tried everything to fix the problem, but nothing worked. He felt trapped and desperate. "Linda, we need help," Richard said one evening, looking worried. "The company is in trouble, and I don't know what to do," Linda frowned. "What do you mean?" "I thought we were rich," she snapped, clearly annoyed. "How could you let this happen? You promised Emma a new car for her birthday, and now you're telling me we're losing money. What about the lifestyle we've built?" Richard sighed. "I know, that's why I need to find a way to save the business." Suddenly, he remembered Sophia. She was married to Liam now, and Liam's father, Mr. Brown, was very wealthy. Richard thought if he could talk to Mr. Brown, maybe he could get some help. The next morning, Richard put on his best suit and drove to Mr. Brown's mansion. The gates were tall, and the garden was filled with flowers. Richard felt nervous as he knocked on the big front door. A servant opened the door and led him to a waiting room. Richard sat down, his heart pounding. He hoped Mr. Brown would understand and help him. After a few minutes, the servant returned, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Brown is busy and cannot see you," she said politely. Richard's face fell. "But it's important," he pleaded. "Please tell him I'm Sophia's father," the servant nodded. "Mr. Brown knows who you are. He does not want to see you. Please leave now." As Richard left the mansion, Mr. Brown watched him from his office window. He thought about the story his son Liam had told him. Mr. Brown had wanted a good wife for Liam, someone who would care for him and make him happy, but he never imagined anyone would treat their own daughter the way Richard and his family treated Sophia. The cruelty Sophia had suffered shocked him. Mr. Brown felt sorry for his daughter-in-law, who had been abandoned and mistreated by her own family. He had no sympathy for Richard, who had come begging for help. This was the time for Richard to learn a lesson. Later that evening, Mr. Brown told Liam about Richard's visit. Liam listened quietly, his face set in a serious expression. "I won't tell Sophia about this," Liam said firmly. "She's 8 months pregnant. The last thing she needs is more stress. I want to protect her from any more pain." Liam's heart was heavy as he thought about his wife. Sophia was the kindest person he had ever known, and she deserved only happiness. He decided to shield her from the truth, not wanting anything to upset the peaceful life they were building together. Meanwhile, Richard drove home, his heart sinking. He couldn't believe Mr. Brown had refused to see him. He felt lost and had no idea how to find Sophia. He didn't know where she lived or even her phone number. Sophia didn't have a phone when she left for the first time. Richard realized how much he had neglected his first daughter. When Richard got home, he told Linda and Emma what had happened. "Mr. Brown refused to help us," Richard said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Linda's eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean he refused? She's Sophia's daughter-in-law. Why wouldn't he help her family? Emma said, crossing her arms, neither does Sophia. She's so ungrateful after everything we did for her. This is how she repays us. Linda nodded. Yes, ungrateful girl. She got married and forgot about us. We should have known she was useless. Just then, the phone rang. Richard answered it, his hands shaking. It was his business partner, and the news was bad. Richard, the company's major shareholder, has pulled out his shares. Our company is falling apart. There's nothing we can do, the voice on the other end said. Richard's face turned pale. He hung up the phone and sank into a chair. This is all Sophia's fault, Richard shouted, angry and scared. If she had helped us, this wouldn't have happened. Richard rushed to his office, hoping to fix the problem, but when he got there, it was too late. His workers were packing up, the office was empty, and there was nothing left to save. Defeated, Richard drove back home, his mind racing with worry. As he opened the front door, the house was quiet. Linda and Emma were nowhere to be seen. Richard walked into the living room and saw a note on the table. His hands trembled as he read it. The note was from Linda. It said she was leaving with Emma. She couldn't live in poverty and had taken all their savings from the joint account. They were gone. Richard dropped the note, his hands shaking. His family, his business, his money, everything was gone. He had nothing left. Tears filled his eyes as he sat down, feeling alone and betrayed. He thought of Sophia, the daughter he had pushed away. Richard realized too late the pain he had caused. Karma had come knocking, and now he was the one suffering. Days went by, and things got even worse. Richard watched as his assets collapsed overnight. His houses, his cars, everything he owned was taken away to pay his debts. He lost everything. The stress was too much for him to bear. One morning, Richard felt dizzy and collapsed. His vision blurred, and he fainted, falling to the ground. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed, his head pounding. The doctors told him his blood pressure had spiked. Richard lay there, feeling weak and defeated. He thought of Sophia, the daughter he had cast aside. He wished he could turn back time and make different choices. Now, all he had was a broken heart and an empty life. He had no family, no money, and no future, all he had were his regrets. Sophia sat in the nursery, rocking her baby girl to sleep. Little Olivia was 3 months old, with a sweet smile and big, curious eyes. Sophia loved to watch Olivia sleep, feeling the warmth of her tiny body against her chest. Liam, her husband, stood by the door, smiling at them. His heart was full as he watched his wife and daughter. Life was perfect, full of love and happiness. One evening after dinner, Liam sat Sophia down in the living room. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious. Sophia looked at him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" she asked. Liam took a deep breath. "It's about your father, Richard. He's in trouble. His company is gone, and he's lost everything. He's in the hospital now. I didn't want to tell you while you were pregnant because I didn't want to stress you." Sophia felt a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, and pity. She had once craved her father's love and had wished he would show her even a little kindness. But now, she had a husband who adored her and a daughter who filled her heart with joy. She felt safe and loved for the first time in her life. "I don't know what to say," Sophia whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Liam took her hand. "I just wanted you to know you don't have to do anything if you don't want to, but if you feel like visiting him, I will support you." Sophia thought about it for a few days. She remembered how Richard and Linda had treated her, the harsh words, the cold stares. But she also remembered the time she had begged for her father's attention, the time she had tried so hard to make him proud. She decided she needed closure. She wanted to see her father one last time and then leave the past behind. The next morning, Sophia asked Liam to take her to the hospital. They drove in silence, both lost in their thoughts. When they arrived, Liam waited outside while Sophia went in. She felt nervous, her hands shaking as she walked down the white hospital corridor. She stopped at the door, took a deep breath, and entered. Richard was lying in the hospital bed, looking pale and weak. His face was thin, and his eyes were filled with sorrow. When he saw Sophia, he sat up, surprised. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Is it really you?" "Yes, Papa, it's me," Sophia said softly. Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I know I was a terrible father. I treated you badly, and I regret it every day. Please, can you forgive me?" he begged, his voice breaking. Sophia looked at him, the man who had caused her so much pain. She thought about her life now, about Liam and Olivia, about the love she felt every day. "I forgive you, Papa," Sophia said, her voice calm. "I found the love I was looking for. I don't want to hold on to the past anymore." Richard cried, his tears falling freely. "Thank you, Sophia. Thank you," he said over and over. Sophia felt a sense of peace wash over her. She paid Richard's hospital bills before leaving. She felt lighter, like a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. As for Richard, he spent his days in a small apartment filled with regret. He knew he had lost the chance to be a father to Sophia, and now it was too late. He thought of Linda and Emma, who had left him when he lost his money. He was alone, filled with regret for the choices he had made. As for Linda and Emma, they had moved to a faraway city, hoping to start fresh. But instead of being frugal with their spending, they continued living lavishly, and soon they ran out of money. They did not know how to do anything but survive. They had to look for work. Linda had to clean houses, and Emma washed dishes in a small restaurant. They struggled to pay their rent, living in a tiny apartment. Life was hard, nothing like the luxurious life they once had. One evening, Linda and Emma sat on the worn-out couch in their small apartment, flipping through channels on their old TV. Suddenly, they saw a familiar face. It was Sophia, sitting next to Liam, smiling brightly. They were on a talk show, speaking about a charity project they were starting to help children in need. Sophia looked happy, full of life. Linda and Emma watched in shock, realizing the woman they had looked down on was now living a happy and fulfilled life. Shame and regret filled their hearts. They had chased after wealth and luxury only to lose everything. Sophia had found love and happiness, which was worth more than all the riches in the world. Liam, Sophia, and little Olivia lived happily ever after, surrounded by love and laughter. The pain of the past was replaced by the joy of a bright future. Sophia had learned that forgiveness could heal even the deepest wounds, and she was ready to embrace the beautiful life that lay ahead. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like this video and subscribe to this channel for more amazing videos.